Yo, what up, what up, what up? Welcome back to Pnoid News, man. Listen, how y'all doing tonight? So, I'll be honest. I was riding down the road tonight, and I saw something the other day, right? That who was it? Arm McIntyre did a video, about this. When does masculinity become toxic? When Jordan Peterson had a conversation about the man problem. Right. And the Democrats, you know what I'm saying, as a whole, right, have stood here and, you know what I mean, fucking, hang on, man, hold on, let's see if I can find, this joint, right? Because, like, yo, this video is fucking hilarious, okay? Yeah, so, all right, so, hang on a minute, bro, like, yo, Olivia Juliana. Hang on, bro, listen, this. Oh, man. Y'all gonna love this.
In the 2024 election, the Democrats.
So I feel like people just kind of lump them into this box when the truth is, again, a lot of them are with us on the issues. They're just not part of our coalition because they feel like they're not welcomed in it.
That's the funny part. It's like none of what you just described were conservatives. You just don't like men in general, which is hilarious because, like, I'm not conservative. At least I don't think any conservative worth his salt would ever consider me conservative by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sure Matt Walsh would poo-poo.
Oh, yeah. No.
Though I did.
All right, listen, I'm going to have to listen to nerds, but, like, you know, this broad, right?
Talking to young men, you know this because we
So
know
the
each
Democrats.
other real life. I spend a lot of time on college campuses. And I
Gave
spend a
this
lot of time
broad
with
$20
young
million to
I
solve the
love
man
young
problem.
men. I love frat guys.
I feel like she added that there so that it wouldn't be like clipped out of context.
And in that, I realized, like, even the ones that identify as conservative are almost always pro-choice. They're almost always pro-gay marriage. You'd be surprised at the number of them who support Black Lives Matter.
Yo, listen. Yo, listen, bro. Like, yo, legit. Like, yo, I fucking can't, bro. I fucking can't. So, like, this is what the Democrats' answer is, right? Is sending out a fat mudblood bitch, right, to come out here and try to talk to men about men's issues and shit, right? It's always their goddamn fuck. Like, listen, you know what I mean? The Democrats literally, like, they don't know, like, they don't like, all right, let me put this like this. Okay, so we used to have a phrase, we used to have a saying, which was basically America split liberalism in half, right? You know what I mean? And gave each of the two halves, right, to different sides of the political spectrum. Like, the Democrats got the social side, and, like, the fucking conservatives, the Republicans got, like, the fucking, you know what I mean, the economic side. Let me put this like this, right? America split liberal capitalism in half, right? Where, like, the Democrats are trying to destroy, like, your culture and your family and your people, right? So that, like, the human mechanisms, right, the human robots that operate inside of your system, the corporate drones, you know what I mean, continue to operate the way they're supposed to, right? And, like, the Republicans offer the motherfucking carrot, right? Like, so that the money, right, as an in general thing, will still stay without, like, having any, like, cultural attachments to it. That's, like, the reality of it. And so if you look at it in that manner, because, like, yo, capitalism is nothing more than, like, the commodification of land, labor, and fucking currency, right? So basically, you destroy, like, the cultural or heritage ties, right? You know what I mean? The culture or, like, the human ties to the land, the cultural ties of the people, right? And the cultural or, like, human or, like, national or like monarchical or even, you know what I mean, just like fucking noble fucking ties to fucking to currency, right? So basically, you know what I mean, this is what capitalism is, right? And so like the Republicans are trying to keep and commodify the fucking land and the goddamn fucking money, right? And the Democrats are trying to like fucking commodify the fucking humans. Right. And that's what this is, right? At the end of the day, because they want females to be able to work, they want females to be able to do the shit that they wanted, like that they needed them to do. You know what I mean? Right. And so that's kind of like, you know what I mean, the mentality and shit. And by the way, the fact that like Jordan Peterson is wearing some like fucking earbuds for this fucking podcast. I mean, I guess like, listen, you know what I mean? Like, I'll be honest, like I wear like a headset at work and like fucking sucks. It makes me look like shit. Like respect, though, respect. All right, so we're gonna listen to this because I got a bunch of shit to say about this. You know, I mean, just as a whole. So let's get into this.
I felt that the Democrats' investment of $20 million to solve their problem with men was money spent so absurdly badly that it was a kind of staggering miracle. And I thought we could have a conversation about all of that, because you're obviously concerned about the Democrats' man problem, but more deeply, you have the sense, not to put words in your mouth, that something is amiss on the masculine front, and you're also at odds and ends, let's say, about who men should turn to.
Right, right. Well, you know, let me just start off with the way that I started off that piece. And there's a very memorable moment for me, and it was not the only time that something like this has occurred, because I've been writing and talking about the challenges that men, and particularly young men, are facing for a long time. I mean, I was sort of standing there jumping up and down going, young men are in trouble, young men are in crisis for a long time. And around 16, 17, 18, I began to encounter a lot of young men who were saying that you had really impacted their lives for the better. And I began with a vignette about a former Marine who was driving me somewhere and started talking about how you had really changed his life. I believe the phrase he used was saved his life. And I was really curious about that. And so I asked him how that happened. And he was talking about when he got out of the service. And this is something as a veteran that I have seen with a lot of soldiers, sailors, Marines. When you leave the service, one of the things that you lose is your sense of daily purpose, especially if you've deployed and you've been downrange. You have incredible sense of purpose, even though it's very, very stressful. It's very, very difficult. It's very, very scary, but you have this real purpose. And you come home and you leave the military and you begin to lack purpose. You lack direction. And you know where that takes people. It takes people into bad places. And he talked about, this must have been right after your book, 12 Rules came out. And he talked about reading that book and how just that very simple thing of the making of your bed and the adjustment of how he viewed the world and the intentional acts of.
All right. So like, listen, this dude was a JAG officer, right? In the Iraq War, 2007, 2008. Right. Am I going to call him a military vet? No. Am I going to say that, like, yo, he was a necessity in the military because, like, yo, they had to have lawyers and shit, right? You know what I mean? In order to, like, you know, fucking defend soldiers and blah, 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 blah. Yes, 100%, right? So, you know, he was in there, though, and, like, he was in his fucking 40s, right? Because he's, I think, 57 right now, right? So that would have been 2007, 2025 right now, right? Shit, 8 years? No, fuck, not 8. I think here. That would have been 8 plus 10, 18 years ago, right? So he'd have been 39, something like that, right? He'd have been 39 when he was in, you know what I mean, in Iraq at that point. So his take on a lot of this shit is going to be like boomer fucking takes, right? Because he's Gen X, but like he's 57, so like he's early Gen X, you know what I mean? Let's keep going, you know what I mean? Like fucking, he has the prototypical Scott Adams attitude about fucking dudes,
of service or kindness to other people really kind of was like a reboot for him. And that always stuck with me, and it stuck with me for two reasons, Jordan. Reason number one was just the sheer power of somebody caring, okay? And this is something that is a huge problem. So many young men, as you know, I'm not going to tell you anything about young men you don't already know, but so many young men do not have fathers. They do not have male role models. And so that fact that a man cares and wants to see them succeed and wants to see them succeed in the right way is incredibly important. And then the other thing that really stood out was the way in which your communications with them were not trite self-help, although you had some basic rules, but you really dove deeply into the philosophical reasons and even the religious or scriptural reasons why you articulated these points. And so two things were happening at once. You were saying, I care, and you were giving a sophisticated enough approach that said that I'm not patronizing you. I'm treating you like an adult. And I think those two things at once was kind of, for lack of a better term, like the alchemy or the magic of the moment, because, and as I wrote, a lot of people on the other side of the cultural spectrum the last thing they were doing was delivering a message that said, I care. In many ways, it seemed as if people were celebrating the demise of men or denying the demise of men or beginning to characterize traditional masculinity as inherently toxic or inherently problematic. And what that told a lot of young men was not, well, you have a problem, which a lot of young men knew. I do have a problem, failing to succeed at school, failing to get some real purpose. And instead was telling these young men,
yo, look. Schools are institutional centers, right? You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people don't look at it this way, you know what I mean? But they are like institutional centers. Like, they're fucking places where you're supposed to be like, institutionalized. You spend 13 years in these indoctrination fucking institutions where you are put through a system that is supposed to build you, right, to be able to be prepared to operate in the workforce later on. Now, you'll know a tree by its fruit. I think that's in the Bible, to be honest with you. But, and I try not to use Bible quotes because, I don't want to sound like I'm, Bible thumping the motherfuckers. But it's a good quote, right? And yeah, either way it goes, right? It's great wisdom. Because, if you know, right, that you can look at something and go, well, this is, a thing that creates a situation where men are placed on a back burner, right? Where men are pushed to the fucking corners and the margins and shit. Then you know that, that's what its purpose is in the end of the day, right? And the reason for this is, right, is again because of commodification. This is highly important to understand. I can't say this shit to fucking know. The system operates, right, on the premise that it can keep expanding in the horizons, right? And whether that horizon is on land, whether that horizon is into you as a human. Because I know you've heard these tech guys talk about putting implants in the motherfuckers, right? Or moving those cameras into your home, right? Which everybody's already done. A lot of people have done. Moving that tech closer and closer and deeper into your very fucking psyche, right? Pushing that fucking structure of the economy further and further into you as humans. I've heard men online, right? Not fucking people on YouTube. Fuck all that shit. Fuck all that. Right? Where I said, listen, my man said like this. He said, look, if you could put put a chip in my brain, and it would make me happy to go stack pants, why wouldn't I do that shit? Mm. Mm. That's vicious. You think about it, right? Ain't that raw when you think about it? As a human. Man. Mm. But this is what we're talking about, right? Keep commodifying. What's Valentine's Day? It's a commodification of romance, love, lust. Your connection to your fucking people, to your significant other. The thing that's been practiced since before we were humans. It's a commodification. The wedding band's full, right? The beers. Commodification. Right? They keep pushing this further and further into what you are as a human being, as a species. They keep trying to commodify more of what we are as humans. Mm. They got to commodify those women. They have to commodify like your masculinity. Right? They got to commodify the femininity. Right? What do you think those estrogen pills are for dudes? What do you think those testosterone pills are for women? What do you think these fucking trans pills are? Right? Listen, they're going to keep pushing. Going to keep pushing and keep pushing. Because they look at you as... They look at you as a commodity. Right? They look at us as a commodity. They're tired of like... Because Keynes said it. Labor is a commodity, but it cares about its price, right? Same as potatoes. But on the same level, they're tired of us caring about our price. Tired of us caring about the things that matter to us. About our relationships. They don't want that. Let's keep going, though. Let's keep going.
You are the problem, which is a totally different thing, which is saying there's something wrong with you. And that was, I think, an extremely destructive development in the culture. Now, it was unevenly applied. Like during the sort of the rise of the so-called manosphere, I was living in rural and suburban Tennessee, and you didn't see that really attack on young men as much. But there are other places in other parts of the country where that was very much a present reality in a lot of young men's lives. And so you have a lot of young men who are struggling. You have a lot who are fatherless. You have a lot who lack male mentors. And then you had this one side of this sort of cultural divide saying there's something wrong with you. There's something inherently wrong with what you want to do, what you want to be, what your goals are, your dreams are, your aspirations. And somebody else says, no, I care about you. I want you to succeed. I want you to feel meaning. I want you to feel purpose. In that situation, like that message is like encountering an oasis in a desert.
So let me ask you some questions about that. I guess the first question I have is why is this an issue for you? And I want to tangle that up with a different question though, because there's a political element to this, obviously. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You
right.
wrote that the Democrats had a $20 million man problem.
Right.
So although it's not exactly a political problem, it's actually a philosophical problem, or it's a spiritual problem. It's deeper than the political. It's just manifesting itself in the political. But I want to address two things. The first question I want to address is, why is this an issue for you? And then let's sort out some of the political issues before we proceed in the conversation.
Well, it's an issue for me for multiple reasons. One, I'm a father of a son. I have a 24-year-old son. And I have seen with my own eyes, in that peer group that he has, how many young men in that peer group, spend a period of time kind of wandering in the wilderness, if that makes sense. I've seen, you can't be a father of a son in this era and have not seen the struggles that so many young men have had. And so one of the things is I want to be a good mentor to my son. I want to.
So like, yo, look, I got a stepkid, right? 14 right now. I met him when he was like 6 or 7 years old, something like that. I call him stepkid because he's like my baby's mom's kids, right? You know what I'm saying? He ain't got no dad. His dad killed himself. This kid, when he was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, he wanted to be a fox, right? To the point where like he dress up like one on a regular basis. And like at one point, one of his aunts thought it was cute, you know what I'm saying? Didn't know about like art, what's going on out here, right? You know, what goes on out here. She bought him a costume, and he dressed up as a fox. And he comes downstairs and goes, "Mom, look, I'm a kind." I ripped the fucking costume off of him, took it out back and burned it. A few weeks ago, he looked at me and he hugged me. He said, "Thank you. Thank you for doing that for me. I didn't know. I didn't know what I know now. It's appreciated. I teach him how to fish and how to like, you know, how to run, how to move. Because his mom's, even up 6, 7 years old, was carrying this motherfucker up and down steps. These are important things, right, that we help young men with. You know, it wasn't out of hatred that this was done. This wasn't the all-consuming mother. This wasn't any of these things, right? This was the like, this is done out of love, out of compassion. To understand, like, this wasn't something that was done on purpose. A lot of these things aren't done on purpose. But nevertheless, we have to be the ones to correct it, correct the behavior. And we have to be like the ones to be able to stand here and go, "Yo, look, no. We ain't doing this, all right? Like, yo, listen, no, okay? It's not manly, all right? It's just not. Don't look at you away, but like, no. You're a man. You look at him properly and you go, no. You go, all right, because they understand. They're not dumb, right? They'll get it. You just got to knock that baby up out of them. Keep going.
I love my son well. And when you try to love your own son well, you cannot help but enter this larger world of what's happening with young men in general. And so that was right in front of my face, watching his peer group come of age and the struggles that many people in his peer group had. And so that was very direct and personal. Then the next personal layer was I'm also a veteran. And so I served in the Army as a JAG officer, an Army lawyer. I deployed to Iraq during the surge in 07, 08. And because I joined the Army later in life, I was the second oldest officer on the base behind our commander. But that gave me an actual opportunity to serve in a mentoring capacity for some of these much younger soldiers. And I could see their struggles and I could see their questions about the world and the life after the military. And then the third thing is I'm very concerned about American culture more broadly. The way in which an increasing number of people feel a sense of despair and anxiety and hopelessness, that we've seen this rise of deaths of despair. And then when you dig into it, who is dying the deaths of despair? Well, yes, there are women, married and single, who are, but by and large, it's disproportionately single men, either never married or divorced men. And there's this real sense of a lack of community and connection. And then you layer on top of this, and again, this is all stuff you're very familiar with. You have the declining number of friendships amongst young men in particular, and men in particular. And it's all adding up to an immense amount of human suffering. It's adding up to pain, loss, anguish. At the very edges, it's adding up to suicide and suicidal attempts. And so we have
I mean, like, are you not going to have a conversation about like that or like, you know, fucking overwhelming amounts of like fucking like atomization? Right? You're not going to have these conversations about like, you know, fucking the media and like fucking all the institutions that we have that push us to these fucking levels, right? You're not going to talk about like the predatory nature of our like fucking system. You're not going to talk about any of these type of things. And this is the fucking problem, right? Legit. This is the goddamn problem when it comes down to it, right? Is that like You have guys like this going, oh yeah, these need this, these deaths of despair need addressed. And like we go, well, like, go, listen, you do understand, like, the vast majority of these people are like divorced or like getting like fucking wrecked or, getting like financially raped, like all these type of things, right? Getting falsely accused of nonsense. Like you have like all these goddamn problems and like you don't want to address it, right? You don't want to address it at all because like that would mean addressing women. Right, that's the fucking problem, right? It's like you 100% do not want to address anything that has to do with fucking what women are doing, right? You know what I mean? Like you don't want to have that conversation at all, right? You don't want to talk about like the wreck thereof of like what like fucking our society and immigration and like fucking the destruction of the middle class and like fucking all the outsourcing has done to like our fucking communities. You don't want to talk about any of these type of things, right? Listen, like how can you stand here and have like these conversations without addressing the root fucking cause? You know what I mean? Like how can you fucking do this?
A society and a culture where millions upon millions of people are feeling the sense of anguish, and if you don't have a heart for that, like if that doesn't touch your heart, just leave aside the politics. I would say, hey guys, if that isn't touching your heart, take another look at this, right? And then the other thing, the political aspect, I truly believe, and there's really, a lot to back this up, that a lot of our political dysfunction is downstream from our personal and cultural sense of a lack of belonging in our communities and our families and amongst friends. And so I really do feel like a lot of the things that are ripping America apart will begin to ease if we can deal with this loneliness, this alienization, this lack of belonging. And so,
I mean, again, can we get back to like the commodification of like the fucking news media? Right? You know what I'm saying? And like shows like Law and Order and like all these things that like fucking basically show like every male is a fucking pedophile or a rapist. You know what I mean? That like every portrayal of the fucking females is like, they have entire channels of like where it's like Lifetime and Hallmark where dudes are basically just savages coming home throwing plates at women's fucking heads. You know what I mean? Because dinner wasn't on fucking time, right? Or like they're fucking out here just raping and pillaging their way through like the fucking neighborhood, right? You know what I mean? Now no one trusts anybody. Like, can we talk about like all this advertising that's been sold that like fucking stands here and sells guys up the goddamn river? Can we have these conversations in any fucking way? Nah, listen, we're not gonna talk about that, bro. Like, listen, because then you be addressing like the shit that you're contributing to, bro. Let's keep it 100.
Even if you're just cold-blooded about it, like even if you're like, well, I just want American politics to be less dysfunctional, America to be less divided. Just dealing with the issue that is besetting, again, particularly young men, is an imperative. So it's an imperative morally, it's an imperative culturally, it's an imperative politically. And if you have an ounce of love in your heart for people, it's just an imperative spiritually. Well, I've been a Christian evangelical conservative my entire life. I voted for Kamala Harris, the first Democrat I voted for in national.
That's absolutely bananas. Like, how are you going to vote for a Hindu when you're an evangelical fucking, conservative? What are you conserving, dog? Let me throw this out here too, by the way. Listen, you know what I mean? Like, look, okay. What is conservatives conserving? Like, what are you conserving? I have no idea what the fuck it is. Right? But if it's literally just like legalism, you ain't conserving shit because that shit changes with the whims of motherfucking any judge and jury, right? Whenever you have a charismatic enough fucking lawyer. Keep it a bean.
Election in my life. So I have been a conservative. I was a delegate to the 2012 Republican Convention. So yeah, I've been a Christian conservative my entire life and have volunteered for Republican campaigns. In 1988, joined the College Republicans at my small Christian college that I attended in Nashville. And very different experience from my law school, which was very liberal. My small Christian college was super conservative. And it was so conservative that we realized as college Republicans that we had no more votes to get for George H.W. Bush over Dukakis. But yeah, I've been a conservative and my entire life and a Republican. I'm not a Republican anymore, but I've been a Republican most of my adult life.
You have written for The Atlantic and for the New York Times. Why do they allow you to write for them?
Well, they were actually looking for a pro-life person when they were trying to hire a new columnist, actually looking for somebody who was conservative and somebody who had, I'm also a veteran. I don't believe there were any columnists who were veterans. I'm also a lawyer. I don't believe at the time of my hiring that there were any other columnists who were lawyers. I'm a constitutional lawyer. So, I think that's the overall mix, but, you'd have to ask my boss as to why. But I was very pleasantly surprised, I'll be honest with you, when I got the job offer. It was definitely not something I was seeking out, but it came to me.
I'll tell you why. It's because he hates Trump. That's how I got the job, right? He hates fucking Trump. Let's keep it a bean.
And I was very grateful and thankful, and I've had a really good experience there.
Getting the most out of life means being prepared for whatever comes your way, but many of us don't realize.
Okay. So you pointed out 3 reasons that you're concerned. Because you have a son, and then you talked about what you saw in his circle of friends. Because you're a veteran and you played a mentorship role there, and then because you're concerned with broad cultural issues. Let's start with the personal. I want to tell you a story about my son when he was about 13. So I reviewed his report card, and it wasn't stellar, let's say, although it was fine, but it wasn't stellar. And so I asked him about that, and he said, "Well, Dad, I'm doing pretty well. I'm doing really well for a boy."
Right.
And I thought, I'd never heard him say anything like that. And it was certainly nothing that he had picked up at home. And it was quite striking to me because for him, that was just matter of fact. And of course, that's a deep rabbit hole, because when your son comes to you and says, "I'm doing pretty good for a boy," if you have any sense, the first thing you think is, where the hell did that come from? And right. So yeah. Seriously, because now that's an implicit presupposition that the boys underperform the girls. That was certainly not a presupposition when I was his age. And it wasn't anything that was appropriate for him, because there's nothing wrong with his mind or his conscientiousness. And so, I've observed that boys the school system is not set up for them in the least. The vast majority of teachers are not only female, but infant.
Well, like ESP, bro. Like, let me tell you like this, right? So I saw a video today from Middle Nation, right? Which, we're probably gonna be breaking that down like some point later this week. You know what I mean? I might actually write something on it. I'm gonna check out the Substack. But he called Americans homeless. And he said, like, if you're part of, like, you're in Islam, you're a Muslim in America, right? You know what I'm saying? If you're part of Islam in America, right? Like, you're still homeless, but at least, like, you're part of, like, like the greater worldwide movement of Islam. On some basic shit. And I thought about that, right? Because I guess it's something I say all the time. It's like, listen, like, you don't really have any heritage in America, right? All of our heritage, when it comes down to it, is either A, the corporate tie, which is the white, and the black thing, or B, it's the shit that ties you back to Europe, right? Which, that only works if you have, like, a separate language, you have, like, your own culture, your own food, all that type of shit. Which, by the way, like, black people and white people and fucking, Muslims and everybody eats Chick-fil-A. So, when it comes to it, like, fucking, you don't have anything to unite yourself with, like, other people when it comes down, when the mentality comes in, right? So, this mental, right, is really interesting. When you think about this shit from, like, a heritage and a long-term, like, idea, because he was talking about like the Malaysian people, right? From Malaysia. And he said they might have people there who go back, 2,000, 3,000 generations, not years, generations. That's a far way back. The most that anybody in America has, really, at the end of the day. Probably like 12, maybe 13 generations. Short of like the natives. And even then, a lot of them are like fucking white. So, just think about that. You know what I'm saying? Just think about that. Right? Keep going with this.
Infantilizing female and radically left. Boys' play preferences are denigrated. They're required to sit for hours at a time, which is not in keeping with their nature, especially if they're active, in which case they get diagnosed with ADHD and get put on methylphenidate, which suppresses play behavior as one of its primary functions. And then they're told that competitive games are wrong because we should all cooperate by people who are too stupid to notice that competitive games are cooperative because everybody's playing by the same rules. And then they're told that boys' ambition is pathological and that the patriarchy and marriage, for that matter, is an oppressive institution. And if they manage to escape from all that, then they're told that the activities of males are destroying the planet. And that's pretty much a comprehensive evil queen pathology as far as I'm concerned. And it's not bloody well. Then you add to that, there's an additional twist too, which we should delve into. It's a universal cultural problem to make adults out of juvenile males. That's why there are initiation rites in so many cultures. And you have to create a responsible man. And the reason for that is that it's a hell of a lot easier to be irresponsible and immature than it is to be responsible and mature. And
for men and women. For men and women, yeah.
Right. Well, the thing about women is once they have an infant, that kind of catalyzes the maturity. And maybe they're...
You're the guy, like, the men and women. Don't forget about women. Women and the adults. Like, why? Women never become adults. They don't have the ability. But listen, they're not gonna address this, right? You know what I mean? Like, I'll address it, right? They had these like 5 fucking stages of shit, man. Listen, it's like the 5 stages of justice, right? And like most dudes can reach at least 4 or 5. There's no woman in the world that's ever been past 3, right? Because women can't, like actually mature to that level of understanding like what it is. Hang on. Let me look this shit up. 5 stages of justice, I think it is. Is it the 5 stages of justice? 5 principles of natural justice? Trying to think here. I'm trying to. But yo, because it was like the 6 principles of natural justice. Is that it? And listen, open this bitch up. Why you being a bitch? Anyway, right. So like, okay. Apparently, like, it's not gonna let me open this fucking page. But anyway, yeah, so like it's a 6 stages of natural justice. And like women can only reach, you know what I'm saying, like certain levels of it. Right. I was gonna like fucking look it up on the other page, you know what I mean? Fucking bring it over. Right. Fucking God damn it. Listen. Here. I think principles of natural justice. And listen, women versus men, justice versus men, ability to provide justice. I don't know, bro. Listen, if I figure it out, I'll fucking let y'all know. And I mean, some at TFM used to talk about on a regular basis. But like, yeah, listen, like women literally can't stand here and, you know what I mean, like fucking reach the same levels that men can when it comes to like justice and shit, right? When it comes to like basic principles of shit. And, you know what I mean, like just, they don't have to, right? Because they're not actually responsible for society. We are.
Nature has a proclivity to initiate women a little more dramatically than it initiates men. So the fundamental problem that cultures face is how to make men out of boys and how to stop young women from getting pregnant out of wedlock. That's the anthropological evidence. And so, so the boys face I think, a virtual conspiracy of demoralization. And that seems to me to be, that's underneath the political, but the Democrats have been playing that hand madly for, I'd say, 4 generations. And now they're reaping what they sowed.
Yeah, I would, there's a lot in there. Let me go kind of step by step, and let me begin with one thing that I think you articulated right off the top, that is, I think, a very important disconnect that is happening. So a lot of this articulation you hear from the extreme left, and you laid out the way there are folks on the extreme left who just comprehensively demolish masculinity. Now, I'd say most boys have not been exposed to that in school. That might be you might see that in some hyper progressive prep schools or whatever, but some degree of that, some element of that is coming and leaking through and permeating through a lot of American culture. And one of the things that I have seen is that a lot of the people, when we talk about this, when we raise this issue, a lot of people in the commentary and the commentary class and the academic class immediately denigrate a lot of the evidence about the struggles of young men and boys, because they don't see in their milieu, they don't see men struggling, because they're in places where it might be, say, elite academia or high-level corporate work, or in the military or government, where men are still at the tip of the spear, at the apex of kind of American commercial and political and economic achievement. Men are still doing quite well. It's the big, giant number of people who are not in that sort of tip of the spear who are really struggling. And because so many of us live in these bubbles, a lot of people don't see it at all. They don't see it at all. And this is something that I think is endemic in our commentariat, and that is a lot of our commentariat lives and eats and breathes a very rarefied cultural air, and they don't have any real world sense of the way that people are living their lives and the struggles they're facing outside of that milieu. And so when you walk into and you start talking about how these young men are struggling, a lot of times you get I've been in these rooms where people will immediately dismiss you. Well, disproportionate number of men are CEOs, a disproportionate number of men are in Congress, you name it. And I'm like, I'm not talking about the tip of the.
All right, so here it is, right? It's the levels on the same. Thank you very much, Gil. Right. Yeah, so it's 1956. It was evaluation, synthesis, analysis, application, comprehension, knowledge. Right. In 2001, it was remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. Right. So like, they switched these up because, I guess they wanted to fix this, for because like a gender thing. But like, yeah, literally no woman can get past like level 4 of this. Right. You know what I mean? This is, you know what I mean? Like this is kind of like the issue, right? It's like no women can get past level 4 of this motherfucker. Right. And you know what I mean? Like this is a bit of an issue when it comes to like education. So they just never fucking like apply the last few. You know what I mean? They keep boys like locked down because like, you know, the dudes, you know what I mean, like are able to fucking create and able to evaluate and, you know what I mean, they're able to like fucking, you know what I mean, comprehend and apply and all these type of things. Let's keep going though.
The spear here. I'm talking about millions upon millions of people, regular Americans who are struggling. And in many ways, they're not struggling because of you, but are you helping or are you hurting? And I can tell you right now, if you're telling men that, for example, traditional masculinity ideology is inherently toxic, you're hurting. You're not helping. And I tend to have an explanation of the struggles of young men that's rooted in a lot more than ideology and politics. It's rooted in changing economies and changing technologies. A lot of things changed in a way that left men in a position where they would often feel like I'm not as necessary, I'm not as needed as I was. A lot of the raw strength, that raw physical strength, for example, that men have, became less and less important to be a part of a vibrant economy. Military is shrinking. The US military is much smaller right now than it was at the height of the Cold War. A lot of these things created dynamics where men felt less needed. And then you have another part of this cultural world that then jumps on men who are feeling less needed, who are not elitists, who are not tip of the spear or regular everyday folks who are just trying to do their best and are coming in and saying, well, a lot of the things that you feel or a lot of the way that you are is just bad and wrong. And so that created this environment in this sense where I'm struggling and an awful lot of people don't care. And that I feel like is just a giant cultural disaster that unfolded. And now it's not unfolding everywhere the same. That litany of things that you said about what people on the far left think and did, like my son and his peers, they never heard any of that in rural Middle Tennessee. That is not their experience in rural Middle Tennessee. But I will say that all the technological changes and the changes to career and the change.
No, 100% they heard that shit in rural Middle Tennessee. All right. And I'm going to tell you why. Right. Teachers as a whole. Okay. This is about the management class. And this is like the whole cathedral thing when it comes to Yarvin. He's 100% right on this. So teachers all go to college, right? And all these colleges that the teachers go to, they are all like given their curriculum by the same people. Right. And when you have your curriculum being given to you by the same human beings, right? You know what I'm saying? Or being given to you by the same like schools, right? You're going to end up having the same attitudes and the same mentalities. So I'm gonna tell you like this. My kids go to a fucking school that is in like the middle of like, you know, bumfuck Egypt in like the middle of a valley, right? And this entire valley as a whole, right? And I'll be honest, since I was like a pup, right? Since like 2002, I've been coming up here, right? I ran up here a while back after I was running away from like a fucking charge. I'm down in the city and I laid up under this brook and like literally like all these fucking people, like they all like talked like they were fucking suburbanites, right? Even though I'm like, you were all Appalachian hillbillies. Like, why are y'all talking to me like you're fucking suburban cosmopolitan people? It doesn't make any sense, right? But like the reason is because like the teachers that they get are the same teachers that you get in every other place in the fucking country, right? So his kid did hear this. It's just he's fine with it because like he is part of academia. He has a fucking law degree. He's a constitutional lawyer, same fucking degree that Barack Obama has, right? So like he believes in the American experiment. Like he literally he has fucking tied his life and his life's work to the American experiment and it being successful. And this mentality leaves not just him, but like his family in the same like spot of going, if this fails, we all fail. Whereas opposed to like what we're looking like on, like I said, this motherfucker fails, bro. Listen, like it might be better for all of us, right? This is the difference, right? At the end of the day, let's keep going.
Changes to all these other big cultural changes absolutely impact us everywhere, and so young men are facing a world, even if they're in a very sort of man-friendly part of the country, which rural Tennessee is. They're still walking into an economy and they're still walking into a culture that has been through a lot, generations of upheaval. And in that circumstance, you really have to intentionally lean in to mentor young men into virtuous masculinity. It doesn't happen by osmosis. It doesn't happen by inertia. It happens through intention. And so that's...
I'll be real, Dark Star. Since you left, right, a lot's changed. Especially here in the States, a lot's changed. There's been an explosion, like just an absolute fucking explosion of just raw anxiety from everybody. And the reason is, right, is because like they let like 50 million more fucking people in, right, since you left. And it's gotten so over fucking crowded that everywhere you go, like anytime you leave to go in public, it's like it's a goddamn tragedy for you. You don't want to see anybody, right? And you're just on edge, constant. And this is fucking not me. This is everyone's like this now, right? It's fucking bananas, dog. Like I'm gonna keep it 100 with you.
That's where, when I was writing my piece that you reached out, when you're in your book, 12 Rules is a lot about intention. Like living an intentional life and thinking things through and having an approach and having a purpose. And that's exactly how you cultivate virtuous masculinity is you're living a life of intention. It's not happening by osmosis. It's not happening by inertia. And in fact, a lot of the cultural inertia was destructive, not constructive. And so creating I think it was absolutely vitally necessary to create a kind of counterculture to that was like, hey, young men, we love you. We care about you. We want you to succeed. And I think that's one of the reasons why, and you often see a lot of emotion spring up in men when they do encounter somebody, whether it's somebody who wrote a book or delivered a speech that finally says to them that very simple message, that's what they hear. I care for you. I want you to succeed. I'm here. I'm going to help you do it. And the best people who do this do it. I want you to succeed in the right way. The worst voices are just go get what's yours, young man. That's the toxic message that indulges the worst elements of our nature. The message that says that here, train you up in a way that is much more akin to, the Kipling poem, If, than sort of any kind of like blind ambition or greed or sexual conquest or sexual exploitation. But if you're building people in virtuous masculinity, I think that's the oasis in the desert. Whereas that toxic, go get what's yours, sexual prowess, financial accomplishment is the be all end all. That's the mirage. That's the illusion.
I mean, like, dog, listen, the problem is, right, when you hear motherfuckers like this say these things, right? The problem comes down to that, like, a house is $450,000 fucking dollars. If you're 21 years old, that is an insurmountable mountain. Right? You're gonna need to go get yours, right? You know what I mean? Like, and this is what I tell my followers, like, bro, like, go be a coyote, nigga. You know what I'm saying? Eat when you can. Eat, right? Like, do not stand here and, you know what I mean, think that the system's gonna take care of you. You know what I mean? Because it's fucking not. You know what I mean? You better get out here and get yours. Like, yo, fuck the garbage, right? Because, like, yo, again, 450, even 350 is obscene. Okay, that is a ridiculous. Like, listen, I'm making the same amount of money I did back in like the 2000s. All right, 25 fucking years ago and 20 years ago, I'm making the same money I'm making right now, right? And I'm going to keep it a bean, all right? The fact that a fucking house is now 4 times the fucking price, right? When it was already like, I don't know if I want to tie myself down to a 30-year payment of $500 a month, right? Listen, that's a long time. I don't know if I'm that stable, right? Like, yo, that shit there, right? Of going like, yeah, listen, tying myself down to a fucking $2,500 or $3,000 a month fucking mortgage note is fucking crazy. Like, yes, you better go out there and get yours and be like, you know what I mean, fucking like, what color is your Bugatti, right? You better be that motherfucker, right? Like, yo, real shit. Or, you know what I'm saying, you better like fucking, you know what I mean, find a way to be able to bang your way to get there. You know, like real shit. Like, yo, fuck the God. And this is the problem. This dude, like, yo, he bought his house for like fucking 60 grand. Yo, in Middle Tennessee, right? It's like, get the fuck out of here, bro. Like, yo, get kick rocks at your bullshit, dog. Like, fuck off.
And that just leads them deeper into the desert.
Well, we should talk about that a little bit, I think, from a psychological perspective, because there are real reasons why that more psychopathic end of the so-called manosphere has its attractiveness.
You know what happens every summer? We all get a little too comfortable with letting our routine slide. We sleep in, we take vacation, unplug from everything, and hey, that's great. But here's the thing. Sometimes that break I just slip on by.
Just like backlash. Now, one of the things that, man, I admire greatly, the psychologist Carl Jung pointed out, was that you can be socialized into a conformist persona. And the way out of that is through the dark side, so to speak, to incorporate elements of the psyche that have been set to the side in the domestication effort. Hyper-domesticated young men are going to find hyper-aggressive young men attractive as role models. And the reason for that is they need that aggression. And the fact that that's attractive is just an indication.
Yeah, we looked it up the other day. Only 20% of men in modern society have ever fucking thrown a punch. Right. You know what I mean? In the end of the day, like, you know, that is, you know what I mean, a very, like, small amount of human beings. Like, that are, like, fucking, you know, 80% of humans, right? 80% of males in this fucking country, right? They want to live that fantasy of being that person who's willing to throw that punch. But they need to be that person sometimes, right? Like, listen, my job, you know, like, I'm a truck driver. Everybody knows what it is, right? And my job fucking tried to make me sign an agreement a couple of years ago, a year or two ago, whatever the fuck it was, that every time we brought back a trailer with a tire, right, that was like fucking had a bald spot or whatever the case is, back to the fucking rail. And we're talking like, you know, me, I work at like 3, 4 in the morning, so I can't see shit, right, on a fucking tire. I'm not pulling out a flashlight to inspect fucking tires. The fuck out of here, right? But if I did this, I had to pay for the tire. They tried to make me sign a piece of paper, like saying that was going to happen. They handed me the piece of paper. I read it and I fucking crumpled up and threw it at the motherfucker. I said, no, fuck you. What the fuck is wrong with you? And the guy was sitting in the office, his nerd driver sitting there, goes, you can do that? I go, yeah, listen, you're fucking a contractor, bro. They want to renegotiate. We can negotiate. But like, you can't just fucking force me to sign something like against my fucking will. That's cohesive. That's coercive, right? Then it's not a contract anymore, right? Like literally, like, yo, we're basically employees anyway, but like, yo, we're not. You know what I mean? So like, listen, you want to negotiate a contract? Let's negotiate it. I'm gonna up my price, right? You know what I mean? You don't want to do that. So like, yo, shut the fuck up. I'm not fucking doing this shit. But you got to be willing to be that person, to tell them no, right? You have to be willing to be that person who tells them no. To fucking stand here and be like, nah, I ain't doing all that. Fuck off, right? Because like, if you don't, then you'll just get ran the fuck over repeatedly. You know what I mean? And in order to be able to do that, you have to be able to have the ability to go like, hey, listen, you want to conduct violence right now? We can conduct violence right now. We can go there. You want to go that way? We can go that way, dog. You know what I'm saying? Keep going.
Indication of how much demoralization has taken place.
Well, I also think that's a eternal battle. I've put it this way. Somebody has asked me, who are the best men and the worst men that you've encountered? And the answer is the same football coaches. Some of the best men I've ever encountered are football coaches who have been able to socialize young men and take this energy, this drive, this aggression, and create it and turn it into a brotherhood, turn it into a community, turn it into a fellowship that is pouring into fighting for each other the right way. And so I've seen a football coach be incredibly instrumental in a young man's life by taking all of that that's in them, all that stew that's in them, and molding it and channeling them and turning them into tremendous citizens and turning them into good teammates and good friends. And you will meet so many former football players who will say, the person who changed my life as much or more than my father, depending on the relationship with their father, was their football coach. And then you will find men who will say, one of the most malignant influences in my entire life was my football coach, because he taught me to hurt people. He taught me to inflict pain. He told me that rage and aggression were my friend. I should cultivate them and burn, And I've actually seen, I've seen different kinds of coaches. And so I would say that, one of the interesting realities of life is that and this goes all way back. If you go back to June 6th, 1944, on Normandy Beach, you had two different kinds of young male acculturation confronting each other on.
Yo, it's the religion of motherfucking the West, son. Legit. That shit is the religion of the goddamn West, is World War II. Like, real shit. They can't get over it, bro. They cannot get over World War II. They just fucking cannot. It is literally their Jesus moment, bro. It is Muhammad to them, right? It is Buddha to them. World War II is motherfucking like Jesus beating the devil to them motherfuckers, bro. They cannot get over it, no matter what the fuck they do. They cannot get over World War II.
That pivotal day in world history, where you had a generation of youth acculturated into cruelty, into viciousness. And yes, they were very lethal, and they were very well trained, and they were very proficient in the profession of arms, which caused a lot of people to admire them, but they were cruel and they were vicious while they were lethal. And then on the other side, you had the forces of American and British democracy and Canadian democracy as well. One of the beaches was Canadian, right? So you had these coming across the channel. They weren't perfect people and they weren't perfect cultures, but these young men were acculturated to use their sense of their courage and their aggression to defeat cruelty, to protect the weak, to protect the vulnerable. And it is striking to me how that virtuous masculinity, that virtuous courage and aggression so comprehensively triumphed in World War II. I'm reading this book right now about the fall of Berlin. And this is a great lesson in why you shun cruelty and you exhibit compassion. At the very end of the war, when Nazi Germany was collapsing, people were falling all over themselves to come to the American side and to escape the Soviet side. And so this was something where not only by our valor did we win the war, our compassion also helped us win the war. And that's when I'm looking at this little angel and devil on the young man's shoulder. I've often think of the bad coach and the good coach, or at the most extreme, and I don't know, gosh, I'm a middle-aged man, so I guess I always have to talk about World War II at some point in it. At the extremes, you have the pure evil of fascism and communism and the virtuous valor of a democracy awakened. And
I fucking can't, bro. Like, I fucking can't. Like, these people who have never read Giovanni Gentile, right? Like, have no idea what fascism is, right? In any way. Fascism is literally democratic. Right? It's fucking ridiculous. Like, real shit. Right? And this whole thing, bro. Like, this whole motif, right, needs to die. Like, a real shit needs to fucking die. Like a horrible death. Because it's retarded. Like, real shit. Like, listen, I'm not a communist, I'm not a fascist. Like, I fucking have some sympathies towards fascism. Only because, like, I think, like, the fascist ideologies are you know what I mean, always a part of, you know what I mean, like basic, you know what I mean, like fucking, like part of democracy is part of our like history, right? You know what I mean, like literally, like there's a fascia like literally underneath of Lincoln Arms at the fucking Lincoln Memorial, right? There's fascists hanging up in the House of Representatives and at the fucking Supreme Court. You know what I mean? Like literally there's fascists sitting right the fuck there. Like this whole idea is fucking retarded. You know what I mean? All it is a whole, it's e pluribus unum of many one, right? You know, like, listen, like it's on your money. I fucking hate them. Like I hate these people so much, right? Because like, their shit is fascist and they just don't understand, right? They have no idea. All right, we're gonna keep going.
And these are the angels and devils that are always on the shoulder of young men here. And look, I know that there are parallels with women, but we're talking about men. These are the angels and devils that are on young men's shoulders. And you're exactly right. A lot of young men will be drawn to that devilish side because not only does it feel rewarding and strong, it's easier. It's easier in so many ways because you don't engage in self-discipline. You don't check yourself. You don't engage in kindness because kindness carries a cost. And so it's the easier path to indulge that unmitigated, unbridled aggression and ambition. It is the harder path to temper that aggression and ambition with courage and compassion. And so that's the...
I got to tell you all a story. ESP in particular, I got to tell you a story. Right. All right. So last week I lost my job, right? For about like 6 hours. So, okay. There's a guy who recently started at the rail. Well, he's been with the rail a while, but like he was in Buffalo, right? And he came down to the Berg, right? And he was in an office role back then. He was like this piece of shit, right? And all of a sudden, like, you know, he got injured, so like he had to like come and like fucking work, you know what I mean, down here, right? And he became a gate clerk. And the gate clerks, they just check trucks in and out all day long, right? And like, so this is Appalachia. This is the Berg, right? This is, you know what I mean, like hood rat central, you know what I mean? Like everybody here, you know what I mean? Like motherfucking duct tape trucks, you know what I'm saying? Like get it the fuck done, you know, savages just all the fucking time, right? You know, like literally like JB Hunt decided to put their like terminal right in front of like Hall Manor, which is like one of the poorest projects in the nation. And they hired the drivers from the local area. And, you know, inside of like 6 months, they had to put up bulletproof glass. Because like, yo, listen, you don't fuck around with us, right? And so like, I was sliding out of the rails. I usually do, you know, I'm really checking it out. Nobody fucking cares, right? You know, I'm doing this 15 years. No one gives a shit, right? It's just how it works. And I'm sliding out and this fucking guy hawks me down and I go, what? And he goes, you gotta check out. And I was like, usually we just slide out, dog. He said, no, you fucking don't. And I go, all right, bro, whatever. Here's my code, right? And I went on about my business. About like 2 weeks later, you know what I'm saying? I get banned from the rail. And I'm like, yo, what the fuck, bro? Listen. And like, come to find out, he mentioned my fucking name because somebody went to fuck him, right? And didn't check him, right? As we usually do. And he fucking hopped in the company vehicle, hawked this guy down, got in his fucking face, and this dude beat his ass. Right? Yo, listen, right? And like, this guy, you know what I'm saying? Like fucking, you know, low impulse control motherfucker, right? An inability to conduct violence, right? With a belief, you know what I mean, in his head, like this guy here. Right, where it's like, you know, he's defending something, right, that's bigger than him on some nonsense, right? And, you know what I mean, like, yo, he paid the price, you know what I'm saying, in pain and blood, right? You know what I mean, for going around and fucking around with a dude who actually knew how to conduct real violence, right? And this is the fucking difference, you know what I mean, the end of the day, right, is, you know, this guy tried that bullshit with me and I was like, listen, I can get out of the truck and fuck this dude up right now. I have a hammer right here, right? You know what I mean? Not a gun, like actual hammer, right? Right here in the side pocket, right? I can just pick him up, crack this motherfucker, and it'd be all over with. And like, yo, he would know his fucking place, and everybody else around him would know his fucking place from then on. But, big but, end of the day, I got kids to feed, right? Not just the ability, right? You know what I'm saying? It's the knowing when. You know what I mean? And the fact that this dude mentioned my name, you know what I mean? On some nonsense, ended up getting him bagged. Because now I got to deal with him no more. Because he tried to hammer me down. And everybody looked around and said, yo, listen, that's Tom Peace, bro. Like, yo, we love that guy. He's fucking cool. And everybody stood up for me. That's how it's supposed to work. You know what I mean? Right? Ain't about like rules and laws and nonsense. Because I'm me. Let's keep going.
I think that's the eternal struggle, and it manifests itself in different eras in different ways.
So I've been spending some time considering the archetypal image of the shepherd in the biblical writings.
Yeah.
And of course, so Moses was a shepherd, and David was a shepherd, and Christ is a shepherd, metaphorically. So the question is, why the image of the shepherd? And you put your finger on it in the discussion that you just brought forward. So in pastoral times, especially in the Middle East, being a shepherd was actually it was a demanding and dangerous job. Like all jobs were demanding and dangerous in those times.
Nothing easy about it. Yeah, absolutely.
No. Well, so the shepherd had to fight off wolves and lions, and he had to take care of himself in the wilderness. So just right there, that's hard. But then the crucial issue is that monstrous capacity to fight off the predators and even to some degree to fend for yourself was turned into service to the most vulnerable. That's why the lamb, the protection of the lamb is such a numinous image in the Western cultural tradition, especially at the biblical level, because all that aggression, I mean, you touched on this, say, with regard to valor in World War II, all that capacity for aggression and teamwork aggression, for that matter, is supposed to be subordinated to service to the most vulnerable. And so the shepherd is this amalgam of monstrous power.
No, it's not, right? It's not about protecting the most vulnerable. It's not what it is, right? It's never been that. It's fucking stupid. That's a liberal ideology. But protecting your people, what's yours, right? It's protecting what you love. That's what it's supposed to be. It's not about the most vulnerable, right? This ideology is fucking stupid. It's about protecting what you love. Right, like, listen, you're protecting the sheep from like lions and the wolves. It's not because the sheep is the most vulnerable thing. You are. Like, that sheep can run and climb rocks and mountains that you can't. Right? Whereas you're vulnerable. You ain't got no fur. You ain't got no claws. You ain't got no hooves. Right? Your ability to climb is nowhere near what that fucking sheep's is. Right? You're protecting what you love, though. That's what you're doing. Right? You're tending to your flock. That's the reality of it. Right? That's the mental. This is the fucking problem and shit, right? It's like this ideology. And by the way, like, they had dogs and shit with them. You know what I mean? So this is about protecting, you know what I mean, like, what's most important. You're protecting like what's most vulnerable. You're protecting what's most important. Right? You're protecting the shit that feeds your family, right? The shit that, you know what I mean, like, you'll make sure that the paycheck comes and the food goes on the table. That's what you're protecting. You're protecting your children's future. That's what you're protecting. Like, your most vulnerable? Fuck, what? Bro, fuck out of here, bro. Like, listen, I can understand you brought up that, like, fucking line from Jesus, what you do to the smallest and weakest of my creations, you do to me myself. Right, it's a beautiful line. That one there, that's a beautiful line. I would defend your point. The sheep thing, nah, bro. Like, listen, fuck out of here.
And service to the most vulnerable, self-sacrificial service to the most vulnerable. Of course, that's a hallmark of Christianity itself, and something that distinguishes it from all other theories of sovereignty, right? Because Christianity is very paradoxical and peculiar in that regard, that it defines sovereignty not as the aristocratic will to power, dominance and force, let's say, of pagan Rome, or even aristocratic Greece for that matter, but transmutes that into the capacity for stalwart and forthright behavior in service to the most vulnerable. And that means the highest serves the lowest, and that actually becomes a defining characteristic of what's highest, which is really quite a miracle of conception.
Yo, James, bro, you discovered that? Bro, listen, you thought about that and discovered that. Is that what it is, bro? You came to that conclusion? No way. It's fucking wild, dog. Like, I'll be real. It's fucking wild. Welcome to the motherfucking party, bro. Like, listen.
Rearrangement. And so this is part of this kind of notion, is part of what's been driving my discussions with men. I mean, much of what I've done on the public stage has been in response to my observation of the desperate situation of, well, young people, because you can't demoralize young men without devastating young women. You know, I don't know if you know this, but you know in the West now that more than 50% of women at the age of 30 have no children. It's more than 50%, right? Half of them will never have a child. And so on the one hand, we have the absolute radical pathological demoralization of young men. And then we have the insistence that although all that masculinity is toxic and patriarchal, that's precisely what young women should pursue. And so they pursue that, in some ways displacing young men, but more detrimentally for themselves, squandering their youth on service to the evil corporate world, bizarrely enough, given that it's a leftist trope, and the demolition of their
commoditization. We started off this stream talking about commoditization, right? Shit, like commoditization. Like, it's very, why, Brad, listen, let's keep going.
Not only of their fertility, but the probability of their what participation in the long-term partnership of marriage. So, I mean, you can hardly imagine a more toxic brew than that. And how we got here is quite the bloody miracle. I'd like you to comment on that. I'd also like you to tell me, if you would, what kind of response you got to your New York Times article.
Okay, well, yeah, let me start with that, and then I'll get to the second, the bigger one. Remarkably positive from readers. There is a, one thing that I think is a lot of people miss, especially people who are all in all the time into political fights online, is that there is still a big American center left, center right. There is a big American center.
About 80%.
That has a lot of common concerns. Mm-hmm. And so whereas somebody on Twitter might be talking about toxic masculinity, there's no problem with young men, the future is female, and all of that stuff, there's millions of Democratic moms who have sons who love their sons so much and are worried about their sons. And so when I go back to first principles, rather than immediately diving into gender gaps and political races and all this, instead talk about struggles, you actually meet people where they are. And where millions of moms are and dads, moms and dads, are right now is I'm having trouble. My son is having trouble, or my son's friends are having trouble. My nephew is having trouble.
Well, I mean, like, bro, okay, so James, in case you didn't catch this in the very beginning, I'll explain it now since there's like, a little more people watching. Okay, so basically, capitalism, right? And I mean, I'm not a commie, so please don't fucking take it the wrong way. But capitalism, right, is the commodification of land, labor, and fucking money, right? And in order to continue the system, they have to keep expanding into like more and more like fucking, horizons, right? And in order to like be able to do so, they're going to do it not just like in like continuing to expand like on land, but also like into your life, right? And into like your fucking family and into your relationships and into like your culture and into like your body itself, right? You know what I mean? Like, they want to like put like fucking, chips in you and like, fucking extend your life forever and do all this type of things, right? This is all just commodification. Right, it's your phone watching you. It's your fucking, it's your fucking Ring doorbell. It's fucking Alexa inside. Right, these are new horizons. Right, that the capitalism has to expand into. Right, and they're gonna keep doing it. Right, forever. Right, it's never gonna fucking stop unless you have a culture to fight back. That's the mentality. Right. And so like, when you have women, you know what I mean, who like, are going and working in like these fucking going to school until they're like 24 or 26 or 28 and then getting jobs and like work until like 38 or 39 and then like fucking going, oh my God, I never had a baby. This is the commodification of females, right? Of their life, of everything about them as people. Because like they're basically selling like their entire soul and their family line and their like, their matrilineal line, right, for shiny trinkets to be able to go and buy, like a bunch of plastic bullshit, right, on fucking plastic cards that, they're going to pay interest for and drive GDP number go up. That's what this shit is, right? At the end of the day, it's that simple, right? And you want to be a conservative, you need to conserve something. Maybe a good thing to conserve would be women. That would be fucking cool. Right? Just keep it in the bean.
Whatever. That's where millions of people are, and they are hungry for somebody to approach that problem with empathy and approach that problem saying, I see all of this. I see you. I see what is happening. And so I think that that's why the response to that article was overwhelmingly positive, certainly into my inbox. Now online, it was much more mixed, but that's an artifact of lots of things that are actually irrelevant to the article. But it was remarkably positive. And Jordan, I'll tell you another story that I think would be encouraging to you. I was in a meeting, one of these meetings, what you have, I call them save the world meetings, where you get a bunch of people into a room and everyone's talking about what's wrong with the culture and what's wrong with everything and what can we do to fix it. And this room was much more left-leaning. Much more left-leaning. There was a few conservatives in there. I was in there, a couple other people. But one thing that was so striking, woman after woman at the meeting stood up and said, we need to be reaching young men and we need to be telling young men we love them. I'm a mom of boys and I love my boys and I do not want this culture telling my boys there's something wrong with them. And this was happening in left-leaning spaces, not far left, not like radical left, but in left-leaning spaces. And so I think, and I have seen it with my own eyes, that there is a desperate hunger in America, broad America, for constructive mentoring of young men. Another thing, you may have followed this, but Admiral William McRaven, who was the admiral who headed American Special Forces, directed Operation Neptune Spear, which killed bin Laden. Just a remarkable American man, American story, American role model. He gave a commencement speech at UT Austin several years ago, and it's known as the "Make Up Your Bed" speech. It's a theme that you've articulated as well. Millions and millions and millions of views for that thing. It has been just spread and metastasized all over America, and not just in conservative spaces. And so that's what I think is encouraging. Lots of people in that big American middle are waking up and saying something here is wrong. And that's why the response to the Times article was more positive, I think, than people might expect. The other thing, going to the bigger, deeper question, I get so tired of like the concept of the gender wars and the concept, the way our political parties exploit gender gaps. So, the way our political parties come in and say, the Republicans might say, well, we win more with men than with women, so we're going to really dive in with men. Or the Democrats say, we win more with women than men, and they really dive in with women. which means we have these giant engines of cultural and political influence who are exacerbating gender and sex disagreements as part of their political project, right? And so it's creating the sense that, and rather than we're all in this together, and that you cannot have, women in America as writ large cannot be in a healthy place unless men in America are in a healthy place, and vice versa. So the idea that we're all in this together, that this is not a zero-sum game, I think that's a message that has to be repeated and repeated and repeated, that the success of men does not mean the failure of women. The success of women does not mean the failure of men. And, I don't know that here's the way I would put, I don't have the same perspective of you about.
I apologize. I turned off the video of Mr. Clean here. I figured listen, you probably want to look yo, by the way, go buy a t-shirt. You know what I mean? Now listen, you can't stand here and go, oh man, the failure of men doesn't mean the failure of women, right? And the failure and the success of women doesn't mean the failure of men, right? Because it kind of does, right? In the end of the day, right? It's not you know what I mean? This shit here is, you know what I mean? Fuck it. When you put women into male workforce places, you have to make the workspace easy for women to operate in. Right, if that makes any sense. So therefore, what you're doing is you're literally taking men's jobs, right? The places that men fucking would succeed in, and you're making them so women can operate in them, right? And so you're making it fucking easier and easier for women to be a part of that system, and you're dropping the value of fucking men, right? And that's kind of the fucking problem. Right. And that's kind of what it is that you're doing. And that, that's, not fucking cool, right? At the end of the day. I'm trying to find these pictures because I saw my man yo, listen, fucking, goddamn it. Dude in the chat, right? I forget the second because I'm not looking at it, right? Has has a picture of his fucking fish. Right, in his joint. Where the fuck is... Hang on here. There we go. Listen, I got it. Now, listen, I just want to show y'all some catches that I've been catching in the past. I hear getting it the fuck in, dog. You know what I mean? It's and fucking out here hitting the water hard. Right? Listen, I just want to share some positive things with you, on the stream, because I think it's important that we, share the positive shit that we're doing, and not just all this negative bullshit culture war nonsense, right? I like making things about positive shit. That way it's not always just complete and utter fucking insanity all the fucking time. What the fuck, bro? Listen, why would you do it this way? Okay, fine, whatever. We'll do one of the fucking pain yet. Now these are not all the catches, right? And this here is listen, I went and climbed a mountain, the other fucking day. Right? I figured y'all would enjoy that. Right? Here's a catfish I caught the other fucking night, and here's a catfish I caught the night before that. Right? Just wanted to throw this out here, so y'all could enjoy, a view of, some proper ass shit. Now I figured y'all would probably enjoy that, right? Let's go back to the motherfucking video.
Corporate evil and all of that. But I will say this, I do think that one thing that really distresses me is that we see people having fewer kids than they say they want to have, and we see people getting married later than they say they want to get married, or not getting married at all when they say they want to get married. And I think we have this gap between people's desires, the deepest desires and longings of their heart, and their actual lives, what's actually happening in their lives, that is really putting a pall of anxiety and failure and hopelessness over American life. So what is it that we can do to close this gap between your heart's longing and the reality of your life? And
all right. No, I did not catch him by noodling. Fucking I did not eat them. Currently, there's an E. coli outbreak in the river because of a flood. And, you know what I mean, our infrastructure is complete and utter dog water. So, like, the actual sewage lines is tied up with the drain water lines somehow because they don't have the map. They don't know where the map is. So, I mean, they don't know where the pipes are. So it's kind of hard to fix.
And by the way, longing for children and longing for a marriage that's not, I don't think everybody, as a Christian who believes in the Bible, it's very plain from Scripture that not everybody has to be married. But if you're somebody, marriage is a wonderful institution. It's wonderful for me. So saying I want to get married, that's a good thing. Saying I want to have kids, that's a good thing. And how can we narrow that gap between the heart's longing and the reality? Honestly, Jordan, I think that's one of the central cultural and political projects of our time, and it's why neither party has been able to win a commanding majority for anything more than a 2 to 4 year period in the last generation, is that so many millions of Americans feel like their dreams are out of their reach, and they're looking everywhere for a solution to this, and in the political sphere, they're definitely not getting it.
So one of the things I thought when I reached out to you is that since we were concerned about the same issues, that it might be worthwhile sorting out whatever differences we might have, and I don't know how much you know about my work, enough to have written about it sometimes, but I'm curious if you have any questions or concerns about what you see that I've been doing, and because I'd like to address them, because we don't need the split.
Right. Well, I would put it like this. There are lots of elements of your work that I have really appreciated, and I've really appreciated the impact of your work that I've seen on people I know and people I love, and I have very much appreciated that. I think we probably had some pretty sharp political differences when it comes to how do we manifest, who do we support, and how do we manifest our shared concerns into the political world and into politics. And then I think there are some things that we disagree on that really have nothing at all to do with what we're.
Yeah, listen, Brad, like they assume that like they could just take a picture of like the monitor back in the day with the pipes on it and shit, right, from the screensaver from Windows 95, and it would just work. But it doesn't. And believe it or not, this is actually like real shit. Cause like my little brother fucking actually used to work. He did the tech support for the fucking water company. Right? He's like, yeah, listen, they lost the fucking. They have no idea where the pipes are. No clue. Like there's a hill in my city, right? And like fucking there's a main strip that runs from like one end of the city to the other, right? And this main strip, it's like basically the center of the city, and it runs down towards Steelton and Heinsberg. It's Route 230. And on this road was a place called Howard's Tire, right? And they just opened a big fucking shop like a couple years before this, maybe like 7-8 years. And above that is like behind that, it abutted a hill on one side and the road on the other. And then like this hill led it up to like a parking lot and a fucking big apartment building and shit. Right. And so like the old terracotta pipes had washed out and cracked, and it was washing out the hill. And when it did so, eventually it got to the point where the entire parking lot collapsed onto the top of this fucking place. And the city, because, well, the city was bankrupt and the city's still bankrupt. You know what I mean? It actually declared bankruptcy. Like the government had to figure out how to handle that one. They're like, how did the city declare bankruptcy? And this was like in '06. They're like, we don't know, right? Listen, they're still figuring that shit out. And they sued they sued their insurance. The insurance company went to the insurance and said, hey, listen, a parking lot fell on our building. And they said, what? They said, yeah, a parking lot fell on our building, right? You know what I mean? And State Farm was like, yo, well, that's a new one. Like, right? And, you know what I mean? They're like, was it a squirrel involved? We're just, you know what I mean? Here at Farmers, we've seen it all. We've seen it all because we've done it all, right? And like the insurance company said, well, hang on, bro. Listen, we'll pay you out when we sue the city to make sure the city's at fault. And they found out the city was at fault, but then the city said, we're bankrupt, so go fuck yourself, right? And the business never opened again, right? because that's my city. You know, it was so broke at one point that like they put the gunshot cameras up and they didn't have the money for the battery, so people stole the fucking cameras off the poles and started using them in a live stream. Fucking awesome. I love my city. It's fucking great.
We're talking about. I think I wrote in the Atlantic that I was critical of your stance on the Ukraine war, that you're kind of seeing the Russian invasion as at least understandable. I don't think you would say justifiable, but understandable to a certain extent. And then the some of your stances on vaccines and I know you've talked about some people need to go to prison around their stance around vaccines. And so it's interesting. There's a different, interesting approach you can take when you have areas of commonality and areas of difference. You can dig into the difference and say, these differences are why we are opponents, or you can dig into the commonalities and you can say these commonalities are why we are friends, but who have differences. And I would really like to see in American politics more of the latter approach on a consistent basis, that rather than saying, hey, we have this overlap, but the differences mean we're fundamentally opposed, say the overlap means that we have a lot of fundamental agreements, but like almost every human being on the planet, we do have differences. And I'm happy to dive into the Ukraine war or to vaccines or any other issue where you think we might have differences. I think that might be helpful for people to hear some of that. But that was, you know, when I have written critically, it's been mainly focused around some of these political choices. And to be honest, they're political choices that are not unique to you at all. These are a lot of the beefs that I have with the change in the Republican Party more broadly. I never thought I would see a day, for example, when the Democrats were more hawkish against Russia than Republicans were, for example. I never saw, and this is on me, but I never saw a strong movement, anti-vaccine or vaccine-skeptical movement coming out of the Republican Party. That was always a far left, crunchy, Democratic, Marin County.
Yo, listen, bruh. Like, yo, both of these ideologies are Cold War ideologies. How do I put this? The people who got real used to the consensus, right, after World War II, are very upset now that there's like such a massive divide between the people. But the truth is like, this is what it used to always be. For, I want to say almost 100 years. Well, yeah, 70, 75 years, something like that. Virginia hadn't celebrated fucking the 4th of July, right, Independence Day. And, you know, I mean, after fucking Pearl Harbor, they did, right, from then on. This consensus, right, you know, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen, like, the old political maps and shit of, like, America, right, where, like, literally you have, like, Nixon wins all but one state, or fucking Reagan wins all but one state, and FDR wins all but one state, and Eisenhower wins all but one state. Like, this was a consensus, right? And, like, to the point where you could stand here and have, you know what I mean, like, the government would, like, fucking put you, would be able to, like, fucking vaccinate your kids in fucking school, or whoop your kid's ass in fucking school, right, with a goddamn wooden paddle, and you were fine with that because you trusted your government that much. Yeah, listen, bro. You ever put a fucking needle in my kid's motherfucking arm in school, right? Without, like, number one, without my knowledge. And number two, without my permission, right? And number three, you know what I mean, against my will in general, I'd fucking kill you. I'd come in with a gun and put a fucking hole in somebody's fucking head for that one. You know what I mean? Like, yo, nah. Right? Like, yo, nah. Right? But, like, literally, like, this is normal in most nations. But, like, America's not a nation. It's an empire. And the empire was cool, right, when everybody was making money and everything was good because the rest of the world was bombed out and there we had all that money coming in. Right? We're the number one manufacturer. Right? Number one exporter in the world. Right? Like, yo, everybody was eating. Unions were fucking, you know what I mean, supplying everybody with houses and shit. Right? Like, yo, we had cars. Fucking wives are staying home. Right? Listen, life was good. Ain't like that no more. Those promises ain't there no more. Let's keep going, though.
County progressive thing. And so there are many ways that the Republican Party has departed from my previous views. And I feel like you're more in line with the mainstream Republican Party now than I am.
Shopify powers millions of businesses worldwide, supporting everyone from established brands to entrepreneurs just starting inventory management to international shipping logistics to seamless return processing. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period and start selling today at shopify.com/JBP. Go to shopify.com/JBP. Again, that's shopify.com/JBP.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I don't know. I haven't called for anybody to be imprisoned with regard to their stance on vaccines. I'm not very thrilled about the fact that there was force applied when people were making medical choices. I think that was a big mistake. And I think there's the backlash that we see against vaccines is certainly part and parcel of that. With regards to the pesky Russians, well, you know, my sense is we missed a massive opportunity in the 1990s to strike a real accord with the Russians. And there was all sorts of reasons for that, not least one of the reasons being that it was very convenient for.
First off, based. I still, to this day, like, legitimately, geopolitically, it is the dumbest thing ever following Britain and their ideology of keeping Europe completely unstable constantly by fucking with Russia. Neither here nor there. Right. But like this here, right? This thing here, right? Go look at your boomer's parents' arms, right? They all have this mark, right? And this is the smallpox injection site that like all of them were given in fucking school in the cafeteria. Bruh, listen, long-term scarred for life. Everybody was okay with it though. Everybody was okay with it. Know what I'm saying?
For the military-industrial complex, so to speak, to have a perpetual enemy, and Russia seems to fit that bill quite well. And so it's not like I'm thrilled about the fact that the Russians have been chomping at the bit on the Ukrainian side of the world for the last multiple years. I don't regard Russia as a permanent enemy. China's a different story in all likelihood. I don't think we really need to go either of those places. I mean, they've been beat to death in many ways. And I am more interested in the issue that we're discussing. Tell me a little bit more about what you saw with your son's friends that concerned you.
Yeah, and boy, some of my son's friends might be watching this podcast, so I don't want to cast a broad brush and have them think, Dave, what does Mr. French think about what, you know? No, I'm very proud of my son.
Yeah.
I have great, he has wonderful young men in his life, but I'm talking writ large. I'm talking about his broader peer group, okay? And one thing, there's a couple of things that I saw. Definitely alienization from the academic world. No question. That thing that your son said about, like, I did well for a girl, absolutely saw that with this sort of sense that this sense of this isn't communicating to me, this isn't reaching me. Definitely saw the effects of sort of inhibiting and play. That's another big one. You know, when I was in first grade in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, I was born in Alabama, raised in Alabama, Louisiana, Tennessee to Kentucky, so all across the South. When I was in first grade in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, we had 3 recesses a day. 3 recesses a day. And they were crazy and they were wild. And all growing up, you know, we played tackle football at recess in my elementary school in Stamping Ground, Kentucky. So it was just a different experience growing up. And so much more constrained play, a sense that school wasn't really for them. A loss of the free range childhood. I know you've talked to Jonathan Haidt in the past, but this sort of loss of the broader play-based childhood where kids roam the neighborhood. That's what I did when I was growing up. The number of forts I cut through thick underbrush. I mean, by the time I was like in middle school, I was a master builder of rural fortifications. Like, I mean, you know, you would just go and leave and play and come back, and your parents would, my parents were great. They would make me be home for dinner, and then, what'd you do? And then I would tell them about my adventures, and boom, I'd be out again until, you know, my curfew. And so all of those things have resulted in this sense of the loss of all of that, this sense of growing frustration, this sense of growing recklessness, and then you made this medication point that's I think, very important. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush. There are a lot of people for whom medication has been important, but I feel like it's been overprescribed at a large scale. And so then you take
There's methylphenidate is inexcusable. Everything about it is a lie. The original hypothesis, just to be clear about this, is that there were a small subset of children who were neurologically abnormal. And if you put them on a stimulant, which is what methylphenidate is, most common ADHD medication, it's an amphetamine, that paradoxically calmed them down. And the fact that they calmed down was an indication of their neurological abnormality. Okay, every single bit of that is a preposterous lie. What methylphenidate does is increase the probability that you will continue to attend to whatever you happen to be attending to. It locks you on and it suppresses play behavior. And there's no evidence whatsoever that it has a paradoxical effect on a small subset of children with attention deficit disorder. What it does quite clearly is stop boys from playing roughly, especially the ones that are more extroverted more sociable, more assertive, more talkative, all of that, more boisterous. And so,
all right, let me say this, right? Okay, so like, I've been dealing with my pops and his shit, right, for like a year or so now, right? Actually, about 14 months at this point. Jesus Christ. And one of the things, like, getting to know him and like his shit and his habits, like more personally having to pay attention to him because I'm his caretaker and I deal with his medical shit all the time, right? Is when he does like coke and shit, right? He goes to sleep. It's the weirdest fucking thing. Everybody else is like, let me tell you about this. Like, I gotta tell you, right? Everybody else is like fucking wired. He passes the fuck out, right? You know what I mean? And it's strange because, like, I think that is a thing, right? At the end of the day, right? 100%. I think that is a thing that does happen where, like, it does calm a motherfucker down when you give stimulants to a certain subset of motherfuckers, right? But, like, I don't think that's, like, positive or natural. I think what you should do is probably keep them fucking busy. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Because, like, what this does is it shows, like, that, you can use drugs. And, like, most of these people end up as cokeheads or meth heads later on in life any fucking way. The motherfuckers are on ADHD or Adderall. Right? And, like, it's not positive for them. You know what I mean? As humans. Let's keep it a buck. You know what I mean? Because I have hypothesized long term for a while now, if you haven't followed my channel. Like, I hypothesized that, these... like the vast majority of these drug addicts and shit started off on like Ritalin. They didn't start off on weed or fucking beer. They started off on like Ritalin and fucking Adderall and whatever the fuck else, lithium shit that they had. And they're self-medicating themselves. Once they turn 18, they no longer have health insurance. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think there's any evidence at all in the clinical literature of the medium to long-term utility of attention deficit disorder medication. I don't think there ever has been. Like, I've followed that literature since 1982. In fact, the first scrape I had in graduate school was with a professor at McGill who was at the forefront of ADHD research and who was a methylphenidate advocate. And I criticized her papers on the grounds of no long-term follow-up. And it's some preposterous percentage of boys now are put on methylphenidate medication. And so
when I was a kid is when it really began starting, because I can remember when some of my peers would start to go on Ritalin.
Yeah.
And that was even back in the day when I'm Gen X. I mean, we were the ultimate free range generation. I was a latchkey kid for a little while. And so you take all of these things, less play, less ability to, the academic environment, less hospitable, less recess, and then there's a lot of downstream consequences of that, and then you say, here's a pill. No, that was not the path. And again, I don't want to overstate this, but I will say that we went too far in that direction. And we've paid, and a lot of well-meaning doctors, a lot of well-meaning parents doing the best they could with the circumstances that they had, fell into this. And it's just been so tragic. And so one of the reasons why I'm such a booster, for example, of Jonathan Haidt's work is that he really wants to get us back to that play-based childhood. And look, everything's trade-offs. It's an interesting irony that the latchkey kid generation became the helicopter parents.
10%. It's 10% of boys are on some fucking medication.
The Gen X generation, we were the latchkey kids, and it's my generation that hovers over their kids, and even more than helicopter, the snowplow parent that like clears the way. And I think one of the reasons is some of the excesses of the latchkey world were really negative. I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff that happened in that total free range environment, but then there was this overcorrection that went all the way to tightly managed play. And, not to refer too much to Jonathan, but there's in his book, The Coddling of the American Mind, with my dear friend Greg Lukianoff, was really important.
What up, Joshua Demers?
And one of the ways that really helped open my eyes and helped me put a finger on what was happening was offering this contrast. Like, in my generation, how young were you the first time you left a house without supervision? And for me, the answer is I was really young, maybe 7, 8. I'm not out of the question that it was even 6 years old. But you ask parents now, and they might raise their hand and say, well, when my kid was 14, we tried to raise like free range kids, and it was difficult even in rural Tennessee, because we would get to the point where we would tell parents as they were coming over, they were letting their kid come over to play. We would say, look, we have a philosophy where we let our kids run around the neighborhood and play.
Yo, listen. All right, let me say this, right? There's two parts of this. All right, so I have my kids, right, who, they go and they run around their neighborhood that they live in, It's like an apartment complex with like 3 buildings, and it's kind of like locked off, Like there's like a big hill that you have to go down to get to like the rest of the town and shit. And all the kids in the apartment complex play, right? Like you let them outside, there's like fucking jungle gym and all this stuff, Like freak and shit. They can all just go do whatever they want, right? And my kids are and have been doing this probably since they were like 4 or 5 years old. They've been just outside playing, right, on their own. For the most part, like, keep an eye on them, but like they go out all day. It's not a big deal. Now, I've said this to other parents, right? In regular neighborhoods. Where like I've told like ex-girlfriends of mine, like, yeah, let your kid go out and play. I'm saying? Let him go have fun. Like, why the fuck you, like keeping him inside all day? Like fucking like tell him to go do some shit with himself. Like, he's up your ass all the time. Tell him to go do something. Right. And it has not worked out as well. Like, yo, listen, like literally like, yo, the fucking kid, like goes out and like starts stealing shit and like fucking things up and breaking windows and just doing all types of ill shit outside, right? Listen, so you gotta like have like a good baseline for being like a decent human being before, you let them out of the goddamn house, right? Just I don't know, I don't know what the answer is to that, right? Keep it in the bean. Right, because like I have my oldest one, like I tried doing that shit with, 10, 11, 12 years old. Like, go on, go play, man. Go have fun. And he goes out and he goes plays and like, fucking the cops bring him home. Multiple times, right? Multiple fucking times. It's just like, yo, goddamn, listen, bro. Like, yo, why? Like, yo, why are you being an asshole? You know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Is that okay with you? Because we wanted to pre-clear that, because some parents would say, I would really rather not, if that's okay. That is not something that would come up in 1984.
What kind of neighborhood? What kind of neighborhood was that?
It was a rural Tennessee neighborhood. We lived literally across the street from us was just open pasture. And behind us was another street with a cul-de-sac. And then we moved from there to the very opposite of that, one of these very densely planned communities right side outside of Nashville. Both of them remarkably safe, but both of them very different. One was very outdoors. One was very much like, if you were going to run through the woods, you were going to encounter a bunch of deer. You were going to encounter turkeys. You were going to encounter, there were coyotes in the hills. And the other one was, well, you're going to encounter a coffee shop and a pizzeria. But in both of them, some parents, and this is Tennessee, red Tennessee, some parents were totally cool with the free range, but a lot were absolutely not.
In both situations.
In both situations.
I wonder, tell me what you think about this. I mean, when these massive cultural changes take place, it's never a straightforward thing to specify why. I mean,
I think it's a kid by kid basis. Let me put this like this, right? So like as a parent, like we all have, like whoever's a parent here, I know Darkstar's a parent, like a couple of us in here fucking have kids, right? You look at your kids and there's some who are just good kids who are super responsible, like you can teach them like a lot of things, right? Like for instance, like my 21-year-old, like I have no problem putting a gun in his hand. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, listen, let's go shoot and let's go do shit. That type of thing. Teach him to drive. I just bought him a car this week. Well, I helped him buy a car this weekend. Right. And then there's other ones who like, you're like, I don't want to give you this same responsibility. Right. Because like, I feel like it would be a bad move because you're just not capable of handling it. I think that's a case by case basis. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just about like, do you feel like your kid would be safe? It's also, do you feel like your kid would not go out and do like dumb shit? You know what I mean? I feel like that's part of it too. And as a parent, you should probably know your children enough to know like which ones are which. You know what I mean?
In the neighborhood that I grew up in, and so I was a child in the 70s, so I was born in 62. So, I had my young childhood in the 60s and my middle childhood in the 70s. At that point, I grew up in a little town, let's say from the time I was 9 till I graduated from high school, town of about 3,000 people, Fairview, Alberta. At that time, the neighborhoods there were a lot of women who were still at home in the neighborhoods. And so the neighborhoods were established and known territory because they were regulated by a network of interconnected women. And so when you had your kids outside to play, outside wasn't hostile territory defined by the presence of no one but strangers. It was territory defined by the watchful eye of a loose network of women. And that all disappeared in the 1980s. And it isn't obvious how that can be put back. Like, the question is, why did people start to become fearful of the neighborhood, given that there was no radical increase in the probability that your child was going to be abducted by, some psychopath?
That's a really good question. We human beings are generally not, we're often not.
It's the news, right? It's the news, right? If it bleeds, it leads, right? It's the ratings game. It's cable, right? And it's the news having to like all of a sudden go from, you had like 4 or 5 channels on the TV back in like the 70s and 80s to like having 80 fucking channels, in the late 80s. Right. And like the news having to compete for eyeballs. So all of a sudden, it goes from, like, oh, fucking, follow us tonight to find out, what happened in, fucking Kazakhstan or whatever. Right. To there's something in your kitchen that might be killing you. Find out what tonight at 6, right? You know, listen, like it's the whole like the fucking the Halloween candy and razor blades that has never happened in the history of Halloween or razor blades, right? And candy. No one has ever put a razor blade inside a candy, right? This never has happened. It's never been a thing. But like every year, you know what I mean? They've fucking taken Halloween from, like kids wandering around getting candy from strangers in your neighborhood, you know what I mean? From like local people who like everybody knew to now you're doing trunk or treats and everybody's shit gets pre-checked and then you take your fucking candy to the police and they x-ray it, right? Like literally like, yo, fucking, they have destroyed like our fucking communities for ratings. That's literally what it was. And it's because of the fact that like this guy here going, well, after World War II, we were all like one people and we had a consensus, right? And we all like, we defeated the right? And like motherfuckers trusted the news. They trusted it to tell them the truth all the time. And it isn't until like the news stops lying that like people realize, or people go, oh man, listen, the news just told me this new thing. And I'm like, I've been telling you this for years. And they go, oh, well, I didn't believe you when you fucking said it because like, oh, you're not an authority figure. Right? That's what the fuck this shit is. Like fucking, like that's what the fuck happened, bruh. Like, yo, come on, dog. Like, let's keep it a bean. Like, this is not hard to understand. Like, why would this be so difficult?
Not very good at proper threat calibration. And so, you in the 1980s, you began to have the stories like the missing kids on the milk cartons.
Yeah, you got that just when women entered the workforce en masse. Those two things coincided. You also got the sexual predation and satanic ritual abuse conspiracies in daycare. And to me, that was all a manifestation of unconscious concern about having your children radically unsupervised, not just unsupervised.
Or just abused and exploited. And yeah, I remember the satanic panic very well.
It was terrible.
It was weird and it was very dark. And so you have this situation, and I think so when I'm coming of age in the late 70s, early 80s, you had this situation where, and I used the phrase latchkey kid before, and there was this kind of gap between the home situation.
All right, so like a bunch of y'all probably haven't heard my new shit and you haven't been reading my Substack. Right, so here's what's going on, right? Check out the Appalachian Gorilla on Substack, though, by the way. Listen, check that shit the fuck out. It's great. So like we figured out a way to make all this shit work. Don't worry about reading and writing. That's not like an answer. The answer is to decentralize food production and bring back local agriculture. Right. Instead of having grass, you know what I'm saying, which is fucking retarded, you grow food. Right. And when you grow food, all of a sudden, like everybody in the community has to help out. And it limits the amount of hours you can work at work, which, ends up, like having you have a real physical like aspect to your life that limits the fucking corporation's ability to control what it is that you do at home. Right. This also allows for better community ties, and somebody's going to be at home taking care of gardens and these type of things, right? And you bring purpose back to like actual relationships between men and the women inside of the neighborhood are going to be trading like fucking different fruits and vegetables and all this type of shit. And like, yo, this will actually allow you to be able to have like actual real cultures and like stop the fucking spread of like crazy fucking nonsense, which we've been going through for the past, like 70 years. Right. It's technology that fucks shit up. It was a washer, the dryer, the grocery store, the refrigerator. This is what has fucked things up. You have to get rid of these things somewhat anyway, or like replace them with decentralized operations, right? Which are on a local level, and you can actually, have an opportunity to have human beings control. This is how you fix this.
Situation that you described where the dad was at work and moms were all over the neighborhood. The two parents working. And then the two parents working the way things are now, where there's loads of after-school activities. If your kids are in sports, it's like all consuming. And
James, you want to hear some crazy shit? The reason we have grass outside is because two nobles back in the 18th century from England and France were competing against each other to ball out to see which one could like have the most crazy designs, right? Cut in their front yard, and the middle class tried to LARP them. That's why we have grass. Literally the actual fucking reason. It's stupid.
There's just a much more, especially for middle class and upper middle class families, there's just activity after activity after activity. So there isn't this latchkey phenomenon as much. And so I think one of the things that happened in that latchkey gap, those latchkey years, for some kids, it was awesome. For me, it was fantastic. I loved roaming the neighborhood, but I was also a kind of nerdy, responsible, straight as an arrow kid. So when I was a latchkey kid, one of the things I started was neighborhood chess tournaments. So if that doesn't tell you I was a raging nerd in middle school, I don't know what does. But I started like chess tournaments, and people would come to my house and play chess, or I would just walk outside with the basketball and start bouncing the basketball, and people would come from all over the neighborhood to play basketball. And that for me was great. But I also know that there were kids who were violently bullied, just terribly bullied in their neighborhoods. There were girls who were assaulted in their neighborhoods. And so not everybody's experience of that latchkey generation, we kind of lionize it on Twitter, but not everybody's experience in that time period was good. And so a lot of those kids who had that bad experience then come of age and they vow, my kids will not experience this. And I would also, this is a podcast, so we can do some sort of like speculation, free association. But I do also wonder.
Joshua, my brother, you were wrong. Right? And the reason why you were wrong, right, is because technology is a thing. You know how they say like idle hands are the devil's workshop, right? This is what happens when you have massive amounts of technology that eliminates their industrial need, right? It eliminates a transactional need for them. Like back in the day, like, women had to spend 3-4 hours a day, like going to the fucking creek and getting water, or like washing clothes, or fucking, in the house, or fucking slaughtering an animal, or like fucking preparing food and all these type of things, right? And we had to walk everywhere to go get everything, right? So like literally you needed each other. Once you industrialize, this shit completely broke the fuck down. This is why women used to get their ass kicked and get lobotomized in the 50s and 60s. This is why. And it wasn't good either, right? Because what you do is you just put all the responsibility on the man, right? You know what I'm saying? And gave him all the authority. And like he also had to go make all the money, and like he just didn't have time to deal with the bullshit, right? And there was no community around to stop all this, right? Because everybody was moving to the suburbs, and like like everybody had left their parents in the South, and or on the East Coast, or whatever the case is, right? And like all this shit, just stopped fucking working altogether. And suburbs are basically like a simulacra of an actual town or a village. Right. Like this is not school indoctrination. This is not, because of like welfare. Welfare is a response to what happened during, the deindustrialization period. Right. And the reason why welfare sucks so much is because like politically it's unviable to give money to black men. That's the reality of it. And poor whites. Our society doesn't like poor people. We fucking hate them with a passion, right? But if we would have just gave them fucking money, like the black guys and the white guys who lost their jobs in the unions, or maybe even just maintain the unions and told Japan to go fuck themselves, right? Instead of like, using, fucking Japan as, like as an ally to defeat, to surround the Chinese as part of the first island chain. Right. We just kept our fucking unions, or, if we hadn't like brought in Mexicans to destroy like all the shit, none of this would be a fucking problem. But it is. Right. We fucked this up. By, our policies. Welfare in schools, not the fucking issue. It's just not. Right. It's going the wrong way 100%. But like ultimately it's because like, we didn't care about, like the poorer part of our society and keeping our middle class or families. And by the way, like, this is a colonial government. Right? This is not, like a national government. It's just not. It was made to expand, right? That's why it is they gave you all these extra rights that you probably shouldn't have, right? It's why it is we're running out of water in like a lot of the aqueducts across the nation, right? Because they're just dumping massive amounts of fucking water on corn. And in any real nation, you just do a debt jubilee, right? To stop them from like losing their fucking farms because you want farmers to farm. And you want them to like give a shit about their nation. But instead, like you just keep them in fucking debt. And so like they just drive all the water out because they have the rights to the water, right? Which was given to them so that they would expand onto the fucking land. This is just how shit works, buddy. You know what I mean? In any real nation, you wouldn't have the right to use everybody's fucking water for the next 4 generations for yourself so you could dig yourself out of fucking debt when your kid's not going to take your farm. They're going to sell it to some fucking warehouse. You wouldn't be able to sell the fucking farm to the warehouse anyway in the first fucking place. Or some subdivision, some realtor, some fucking commercial development joint. This is what it is, dog. I mean, let's keep it 100.
If the part of the delay in having children, if part of the anxiety of the moment is that you have a lot of people who are not wanting to have kids, and then in the fewer number of children, is they don't want to have kids until they're ready to be able to make sure everything is okay.
Yeah,
I
think, David, what we should do is we should close this section off. We should talk about exactly that on the Daily Wire side.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've been speaking with my wife a lot. She's particularly concerned about the plight of young women, and the fact that if young men lack mentors, I would say the crisis is actually even more acute among young women on the mentorship front. I think,
especially when you add in the pornography element to this, where young men lack mentors and are being acculturated into relationships through early exposure to pornography, and we wonder why there are major relationship problems in this country.
Yeah, well, that's another thing that we can talk about on the Daily Wire side. So I want to talk to you, if you would, about some ideas about timeline for life. How old are you?
56.
56. So we're roughly the same age. I'm 63. And so I guess you were a kid more in the 80s and I was a kid a little bit more in the 70s, but it's not that much different. So let's do that. Let's close this off. The more discussion that can be had about the utility.
All right, folks. You know what I'm saying? That is the end of that right there. All right. As far as ground cover, like fucking whiteboard, fucking my brother. Right. As far as ground cover is concerned, you know what I mean? Like fucking yeah, ground cover is important. But ultimately, like, yo, this would be done by like, you know, more natural fucking grasses, and shit that you could fucking eat, right? Like for instance, you know, they used to make dandelion stew, right? And like, look at the sunflowers all over the fucking place, and honeysuckles, and you know, what I mean, all types of shit, right? You know, what I mean, that you could fucking grow, that you could fucking eat. Right, rather than, you know what I mean, having it be, you know what I mean, just like fucking inedible fucking, you know what I mean, like ornamental fucking horticulture. Right. I'm just putting that out there, bro. You know what I mean? Putting it out there. Like maybe things that are like maybe we should be growing things that are edible and not things that are inedible. Right. You know what I mean? Because there's no reason if you have like, you know, 3/4 of an acre of fucking ground, you should be buying all your goddamn food from the fucking grocery store. Just putting that out there. I understand, like, you know, like if fucking tomatoes are literally cheaper than the cost like it is to fucking grow them, which by the way means that like farmers aren't making any money on fucking tomatoes, right? A lot of these fucking problems in our fucking agricultural system. Anyway, yo, listen, I'm Tom Peace with Pnoid News. Y'all know the deal. I'm gonna go fucking lay down and go to fucking sleep. I love y'all motherfuckers. I hope y'all have a great night or a great day anyway. You know what I mean? I'll see y'all on the flip side.